Hello! Welcome to Karl Taylor Live on social media. Social media, what a word. Right, now, I'm going to take some questions today. So if you've got any photography related questions you'd like to put through to me, they'll come through whether you're watching on that social media channel, this social media channel. They'll come through to me on this iPad and I'll do my best to answer them. Obviously we get a lot of questions come in, so I might not be able to answer them all. Let's talk about a few things while we're waiting. I want to talk about, oh, this happened, look at this. Can you see that? Those photographers amongst you that are studio photographers, you'll recognize that is a modeling lamp out of a studio light, out of one of these, you know, that's typical studio light. And look what happened to this. This is the first time in, can I refocus this? Yeah, look, this is the first time in, I don't know, 25 years of studio photography that I've ever seen this happen. You can see it's exploded a hole out of the side of the modeling lamp. The filament must have been touching the edge of the glass, and it got so hot that it actually exploded out of the side of the modeling lamp, and it made a huge, huge bang. I'm not sure I refocused that camera, Ben, you might want to check it. It made a huge bang, and I've got to say, I am eternally grateful for the fact that the Broncolor studio lights have these protective domes on them, because that really was a lifesaver, because there's your modeling lamp and there's the flash tube. Now the flash tubes on these, like many flash systems, is replaceable. You just pull it out, as is the modeling lamps, because the modeling lamps, you know, I don't know how many hours you get out of them. These are 650 watt modeling lamps. So you don't use those for photography. It's the flash tube you use for photography. This is a common question actually, because people see these on and they say, oh, it's continuous light. But they don't realize that the flash burst comes out of that little donut bit there. Anyway, they've got these protective glass domes. They've got frosted ones for Fresnel lights and different lights that need a point light source. And they've got clear ones. And they've got these protective domes go over the flash tube and the modeling lamp for protection. And good job, because that, as I said, that thing exploded with a hell of a bang, melted glass, burning hot melting glass flying out of that thing, and it was blocked by the protective dome. So I'm very grateful for that protective dome, I can tell you. Now, what have we been up to? Questions already coming in. We'll come to some of those in a second, not in a section. We'll come to those in a second. We had 2 horses and a goat in this studio, bizarrely, last week. Let me show you a little clip of that. Let me just find the clip first of all. This was amazing, right? We did a workshop last week with legendary photographer Tim Flack. Here's a horse, a massive, giant horse coming into my studio for a photo shoot with Tim Flack. We did this workshop. We had these amazing guests come from all over the world to join us on this workshop. Let me just bring up the other video as well. And it was a super event, 4-day event. Here it is here. Look, here's some highlights of it. You know, all the talks. We had a model, we had horses, we had this goat, we had, there's the goat. Look, we had this goat in the studio. And it was just an absolutely there's all the guys getting together. Absolutely inspirational workshop. We had a brilliant time, and Tim Flack, fantastic photographer, came in here and he did the animal photography and a lot of theoretical stuff, and I also presented theoretical stuff and did product photography and some beauty shots, and it was just incredible. We had such a great week. What a lovely bunch of guys that came in on this workshop, and we hope they went away with some really important newfound knowledge. Now, we are going to run the workshop again. It's going to be about the same time next year, because we've already had a few inquiries, people that have heard about it. We're going to put out a little highlights video on the workshop page. You can find it on karltayloreducation.com workshop. But we are now going to take bookings for the event for next year. So we're going to run it again next year. So if you're interested in attending, you can look at the itinerary that's on there at the moment, which was for the workshop from last week, but it'll be the same itinerary. It'll just be next year instead. So if you're interested in that, then please do contact us, and we'd be happy to welcome you on that workshop. All right, let's take a question. We have, first question from Brian Talmasino. How do you go about coming up with that extra 5% in a picture that takes it from a great picture to a world-class image? Now, that's a very good question, Brian. I wouldn't say it's just 5% though. First of all, I'd say it's a good 20% because there's a difference. And it's actually interesting because it's some of the stuff that we covered on this workshop, and it's to do with human visual perception. Okay, we take images, and it's great, you know, all the technical stuff. We teach all the technical stuff on Karl Taylor Education about how to light, mood, emotion. Those are key factors, you know, lighting for emotion and delivering emotion in an image. But you have to, as a photographer, look at images from the other side of the camera, from the viewer's point of view, from the person who's going to be looking at your work. And you have to consider how people perceive images, human visual responses to images. And there's a lot of very interesting neuroscience to do with that, and a lot of interesting theoretical stuff. And that's exactly what we covered on the workshop last week. It's that deeper level information about how the eye is guided through a picture. What is the natural way that an eye or the brain examines an image? What are things to do with color, color theory, compositional contrast theory, all of these, you know, certain extra level perception things that we covered on the workshop. I'd say that's a big part of that extra 20%. The other part is also emotion, you know, invoking emotion, feeling emotion, describing emotion. You know, you see a lot of really nicely, technically well executed pictures. You know, the lighting is the correct exposure. It's either nice and soft or contrasty, or it's got a bit of bite, or it does what it wants and everything's things. But it all looks a bit color by numbers, you know, it all just looks a bit sort of not perfect in many ways, but sort of just lacking something, lacking emotion. And that is the key thing. It's delivering emotion. But how do you deliver emotion? You deliver emotion through correct narrative, through correct use of lighting, through correct conceptual ideas. But you also deliver it through understanding how people perceive images and how they're emotionally considered by humans and by the brain, how they're processed emotionally, and that's a big part of it. So it's very complex, Brian, and it is something that we partially cover on karltayloreducation.com. In one of the chapters we touch on it, but it's something that we cover more in depth in person on a workshop like we just did with this 4-day workshop last week. Mark Mitro says, want to talk about the absolute on the desk. The absolute. Actually, yeah, let's talk about this because this brings me on to my next thing. Right, tonight on karltayloreducation.com, we got another live photo shoot show, and we're doing clear liquids. We've done whiskies, we've done wines. Let me just bring up the website. That's my commercial site. Let's go. Right, so tonight's show, live gin or vodka, showing how to shoot a shot like that, exactly like that, what's involved. That's tonight at 6 p.m. UK time, so just a couple of hours away. And that'll be 1 p.m. USA time, or have they changed their clocks? I don't know, but it's 6 p.m. UK time. I think it's 1 p.m. New York time. Now, one of the tips that I'm going to be giving away in this is we often get asked, and I'm not going to tell you now because we sell education, but take a look at this bottle. Have a look at that. Look at those beautiful condensation droplets that are all over this pre-prepared bottle. Now, they don't run, they don't move, they won't go away, those, because they're solid. Okay, we've got a special technique. You're going to have to come and refocus this camera again, Ben. We've got a special technique for creating these amazing, perfect droplets. And, you know, you're going to have all these people that are going, glycerine. It's not glycerine, okay? It is not glycerine, all right? We don't use glycerine for that. It's something that we create. It sets rock hard, and then we can make these perfect condensation droplets, which is great for beer shots, bottles of beer, pints of lager, or cold, chilled vodka straight out the fridge. So we're doing a live shoot tonight, karltayloreducation.com. If you've not experienced karltayloreducation.com, it's only $14 a month. There is hundreds and hundreds of hours of modules. Come and check us out. Even if you just pay for a month and cancel, it's worth it just to watch a couple of live shows. So live show tonight on that. So that's the answer to that one, Mark. Jerry Fickham says, hey, Karl, could you do a tutorial on white wines in clear bottles on white backgrounds using the very basics of equipment? We've got a tutorial on that already, Jerry. It's already on the website. We've got a pack shot, I believe, doing a pack shot on white, and we're doing tonight's live show, which is clear bottles. So I think you'll find that already on karltayloreducation.com. Kat Peterson, are those lamps sensitive to skin oils? Yes, they are. When you put a modeling lamp in a studio light, you have to use the plastic wrapper or a tissue paper to insert them into the thing. Otherwise, that can cause them to fail. But that was not the case in this one because I always use the protective wrapper to put them into the lamps. Ethan Davis, do you think it's a good idea to invest in a space for photography early on? I found my space limits my photography greatly and have started looking for spaces to rent. Yes, Ethan, I do. I think it's kind of an odd one. It's a bit of a paradox because many of the big names in photography have gone away from owning their own studio because it's so expensive if you're based in the city or wherever to own your own studio. So what they do is they rent studios from a large complex. Like we use a place called the Work Studio in London. Recently, last year I did a workshop in Paris, and we used a pin-up studio in Paris. And I've used lots of different studios all over the world, and they cost about £1,000 a day to rent for one, about this size. This studio area is large. This is 3,000 square foot or 4,000 square foot with the upstairs part. But this is my studio, so this is where we work, and we need a large studio for all the filming and everything else we do here. But to rent a studio like this in the city would be about £1,000 a day, which is obviously prohibitive to most people. There are lots of smaller studios that have sprung up recently that might be about £300 a day or £400 a day. And I say they're not that small, they've still got decent sized space. So that's one thing you consider, but that's usually if you're an established photographer, because you're only going to rent it when you've got a project to work on. But the problem with that is you're limited then to only being able to use a studio and shoot when you've got a commission, and therefore you can't actually use a studio for any of development ideas or testing or anything like that. So that's why I love having my own studio, because we can shoot at any time, come up with ideas, concepts, and it's there. Now, obviously, that's more difficult if you don't have any space at all. So if you can invest in your own space, even if it's like a double garage or, my very first studio was in my dining room in my apartment. That was my first studio where I started shooting product photography. Then I grew to a slightly bigger studio. It was only a small one though at that point. But I managed to do a lot of cool stuff in there. And then as business grew, I got to a bigger studio and a bigger studio. So I've always had my own studio, and I could never really see a way, for me anyway, of how I could work without my own studio. But as I said, there are many photographers at top level that either exist with a really small studio and then rent a bigger studio when they need it, or they don't have any studio at all. But if you can afford it and you think you can make it work, then yes, Ethan, having a space to breathe and to experiment makes a big difference. Aman Ali Khan says, doing e-commerce shoots for the past 5 years, just frustrated with 3 lights. Can I do anything new? Well, I can do loads of stuff with 3 lights, Aman. 3 lights would be my minimum number to work with. But look, while we're on the subject, right? Let's talk about creativity, okay? Let's talk about creativity and what you can do. So if we go into, this is my Squarespace website. Now, by the way, I've got to put a shout out for Squarespace. This episode is kindly brought to you by Squarespace. We wouldn't be bringing you this if it wasn't for Squarespace. So these Q&As are thankfully, they're down to Squarespace. Now, this is my Squarespace website that I use for my commercial photography. Now, you're talking, Aman, about 3 lights, okay? I just shot these pictures last week and I just updated them to my Squarespace site just like that, because it's great, you know, being able to drop your images straight on the Squarespace site. Here it is here. Now that image uses 3 lights, okay? So we can't say that we can't be creative with just 3 lights. That image only uses 3 lights. Let's look at another one of the images that I also shot last week, this one. This image only uses 3 lights as well. Now I do have images that use tons and tons of lights. So actually this new one I posted today, that only uses 1 light. That's 1 light only on that shot. But then I've got other images here. Where is it? If you want to check this out, this is karltaylor.com, which is different to the karltayloreducation.com website. This is my personal, right? This image uses 12 lights, and it needed 12 lights for this shot for this company. But as I said, we can create some really amazing, cool stuff with just 1, 2, or 3 lights. So I often use 2 to 3 lights for a lot of my work. Now, by the way, let's just go back to this. This is the Wells template on the Squarespace website. I'm actually thinking about changing my template soon, and it's really easy to change the templates. You just go into their gallery, and then you choose a different template, and it will still use all your same images and show you a preview of a new layout. So I'm going to experiment with that soon, because I'm just fancy a change. Although I really love this particular one. I've got my drop-down menus here, my different categories, got a whole bunch of about stuff in here, media articles, workshops, bits and bobs here, and then links over to our education. So my Squarespace site, as it is, works really well for us. And I want to say thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. But going back to Aman's question, yeah, of course. Look, I've just shown you what you can do with 3 lights. So it's about thinking creatively and understanding a greater level of knowledge about lighting and what you can do with it and how you can use it and manipulate it to create certain looks. Jacob Mananay says, what does he say? I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Manonane, I think that is. Hi, Karl. You mentioned colour and perception of images. Any plans making in-depth tutorials specifically on the colour spectrum? Well, yeah, I mean, it's not really just, the colour spectrum is visible light. That's every colour we can see, from ultraviolet, just above ultraviolet, violet, up to near infrared, okay? That's the visible spectrum of light. We have these receptors that can see those wavelengths of light. They're different nanometric frequencies of light, okay? That's the color spectrum. But when we talk about color perception, we're talking about color juxtaposition. We're talking about color contrast. We're talking about the hue, saturation, luminosity values. Lots and lots of factors to do with the way our visual systems work. There's way beyond just talking about a colour wheel, okay? It's more in depth than that. As I said, we do touch on this in one of the tutorials on Karl Taylor Education, but you know, to get this information across properly, it really did take a 4-day workshop, including the shoots. So Tim and I delivered this information in bite-sized 1-hour tutorials in a way that we hopefully felt got the information across so that it was most valuable to those attending the workshop, so that they could understand it and apply it. And that's the key thing. And the feedback we got from everyone was that it was very, very useful to them. Abit Sharma, is it possible to shoot ISO 800 and above for professional or commercial photography work? No, not for what I do anyway. For this type of image here, I'm shooting this at the lowest ISO, which the default is actually 100 ISO or 64 ISO on my H6. On my old H5, which was a CCD sensor, I used to shoot it at 50 ISO. I can shoot at 800 ISO. As a matter of fact, I do have a shot on here, which was shot at 800 ISO, because the CMOS sensor, this one was shot at 800 ISO, because I also used some ambient light as well as studio lighting. So I needed 800 ISO for that one, and I could get away with it. But generally speaking, on product photography, no, you want to be shooting 100, 200, maybe 400 at a push. I think there are certain things you could shoot that are maybe more textural, where noise would not be noticed. And to be fair, the Hasselblad behind me over there, the H6 there, is very, very good, even up to 1600 ISO. But as good practice, no, you want to keep your images as clean as possible. Daria said, what is the best basic lighting setup for food photography, please? Well, it's a single octabox, big single octabox. And on here, in our product section, in karltayloreducation.com, we have got tons of food photography tutorials there, and we show you how to light them very simply and how to create even more interesting light. You can see, look, you can see a big octabox in the background of that thumbnail there, but you actually see us come up with a lot more interesting stuff than that. And we've also got about a dozen new food tutorials with Anna coming out. When are they coming out, Ben? In the month or two from now. So check that out there. Jeremy Russo, hi Karl, we see a lot of things about Brexit. Will it change anything for you and for Karl Taylor Education? That's an interesting question. We've been looking into this because we have to, we charge our monthly membership fee, and we have to charge tax based on the European country. So if you purchase a membership in France and it's like $14, you might have 15% VAT that's charged for your country. And at the moment, all of that VAT, for no matter which European country it is, gets delivered to the UK tax authorities and they redistribute it to the other countries. So now we're going to have to figure out with the EU how we transfer the tax takings or payments back to them. We're all in the dark about this whole Brexit thing. It's an absolute nightmare, complete disaster. I don't know where it's going to end up. I don't know why anyone wanted to implement this thing. It just seems so complex. I don't think anyone knew what they were getting into. I've got a French wife, 2 kids with French passports. So, you know, it may even create extra trouble for travel, not for them because they got French passports, but I don't. So there's lots of things that I just find there was a lot of misinformation dealt out there about it, and I really don't see any positives from it. So anyway, I don't like talking politics, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Diraj Kagade says, is Godox getting better than Broncolor? No, it's not getting better than Broncolor. I don't think there's any brand. You've got 2 top lighting brands. You've got Broncolor up here, and then I think we've got Pro Photo a little bit below in terms of what the quality of what they deliver and the modifiers. And a lot of it is to do with the modifiers, you know, these things. It's the kit that you put in front of the light that's the important. You know, all studio lights, they all put out a burst of flash out here. And obviously the consistency of that flash, the fact that these are incremental in 1/10 of an f-stop with a huge f-stop range, and every flash that fires out there is consistently the same exposure, perfect every time, which makes layering images really good in product photography. But one of the most important things is what you attach to these lights, the modifiers. It's the modifiers that shape the light, create the emotion. And I think Bron have got the best range of modifiers, certainly the best parabolics as well, but the best range of modifiers, most versatile, strongest, hardest wearing ones. I used to shoot with Elinchrom years ago, and they were a good sort of entry level or budget price brand, but after many years of use, they start falling apart a bit. So it depends how hard you're going to treat them and how much you're going to bash them around. Pro Photo makes some good stuff, tough stuff, but for me, flash duration and range and repertoire of modifiers is the key thing, and that's why I use Broncolor. I don't know much about Godox. I mean, if it pulses out a bit of flash, great, but you've got to think beyond just the burst of flashlight. It's what you do with the light after that as well. Hermino Mello says, Karl, please, I'd like don't talk too much about gear, but could you please run quickly deep in Hasselblad cameras, glasses, roadmap, and how that would affect product? How would it affect product photography? Well, I'll talk briefly about it. There's some good reasons why some photographers use 35mm. Like, okay, here's a good example. Tim Flack, great animal photographer, he shot most of his last book on a Canon 5DS. But that's slightly different to product photography because a lot of my art directors will want a crop in an image, and this is a 100 megapixel back on here, CMOS 100 megapixel back, and they do a 50 megapixel, the lens choice. Everything for me and tethered shooting, everything for me, this suits my way of working in medium format. It's a nice, slow-paced way of working, and the quality of the images, the tonal range, everything is superb. But it is also very expensive. I admit it's very expensive. But I got into the Hasselblad system back in 2005 when they launched the H1 with a 22 megapixel back. That's when I first switched from film to digital. And at that time, it cost me about £23,000 for that Hasselblad camera, but I was spending nearly £20,000 a year on film and processing, so it was a no-brainer for me. It was just a business decision that made sense, you know. Buy this camera, never pay for film and processing again. Great, there we go. And then the great thing with the Hasselblad loyalty system is they do a really good upgrade path. So once you're in the system and you want to upgrade to the next model, you get good trade back value on your previous camera and stuff. So what the roadmap is for cameras in the future, I don't know. I can't see the point of going beyond 100 megapixels because a 100 megapixel image is so detailed now that it looks like, you know, as good as the old 10x8 or 5x4 transparencies drum scanned. So I don't see the need for going beyond 100 megapixel. And if you go beyond 100 megapixel, then diffraction could become more of a problem when shooting at small apertures. And we have to shoot at small apertures quite frequently for product photography to get the depth of field, or we use tilt and shift lens or tilt and shift adapters, or we put the back on a technical camera where you can tilt and shift on the camera. As we go with bigger megapixel cameras, the photo sites, that's your kind of pixels if you like, they get smaller and smaller to squish more megapixels on. And the downside of that is something called diffraction when shooting at small apertures. So you get more depth of field, but you actually get a softening to the image, a sort of a reduction in contrast. And I think it's going to take a lot of work to start creating higher resolution cameras with no diffraction, because I think optics are going to have to be improved, the aperture systems are going to have to be improved, the photo sites, something's got to change for the physics to work. But for me, I was happy with 50 megapixels actually, but I went with the 100 megapixel because I swapped from the CCD 50 megapixel to the CMOS, and I'm glad I did because the CMOS does give me that extra versatility of shooting at higher ISOs, which is useful from time to time. Next question is from Tamara Ellen. Hello Tamara, how are you? Are you well? I have always, Tamara interviewed me on her talk show on YouTube, if you want to go and find that somewhere. I have always used Camera Raw. I want to switch to Lightroom since you use it a lot. Why do you like it better? Seems most people are using Lightroom. Lightroom is exactly the same as Camera Raw. All the features that are in Camera Raw in Photoshop are in Lightroom. I think people's preference for using Lightroom is just easier to organize your image files and coordinate them and rate them and then catalog them. That's really the only difference. The actual functionality of processing the files is exactly the same. Frank Greiger says, when will the new Anna Pushtinikova food classes be released? And I think we've already answered that. It's going to be probably April. Stephen Edwards, will you be at Shutterfest? Nope, I've never even heard of it, Stephen, I'm afraid. Daniel B, I need a small camera for night and indoor photography. Do you think I can get away with a 4/3 sensor when it comes to low light? But yeah, possibly. I mean, the best low light camera I've used is the Sony a7 II. We use that for video. It's only 12 megapixels, but we use it video. That's got incredible low light capabilities. And we can put all the blackout blinds on, turn everything off in here, and that can see enough light just from the little LEDs shining off the Scoro pack. So it's amazing. Ethan Davis, thanks for the reply. Also, when will the results of the motion competition be released? I don't know. We haven't even judged it yet, have we? I don't know. What's the deal with that? It closed on Monday. Okay, that competition closed on Monday. So what day is it today? Wednesday? Thursday today. See, I don't even know where I am, right? So I will be judging that next week. And then we will release the results next week, by the end of next week, I suppose. Luzanne says, hi, what is your opinion on stock photography? Is it still a viable option? Not sure, Luzanne. I've got a couple of photographers that still put stuff into stock and they do all right. but it's not their main source of income. Stock photographers had it good for a while, but not anymore, because millions of people are putting stuff in stock, and lots of photographers are turning out good work, and it's going to stock. And micro stock has brought the prices right down. A lot of the stock libraries themselves are now taking greater and greater commissions and leaving the photographers with little, which is unfair. So no, I'm not putting my work in stock libraries at the moment. Story support. What about Breeze equipment? It's not only video, is it? I think you mean Breeze. They do parabolic lights, which I think are pretty good. I think they're mostly for video, but I don't know. They might do flash heads, or you might be able to get adapters to put flash heads in. But the Bron ones are good, so I go with the Bron ones. James, hello Karl. Can you please make a video about some color toning, color grading techniques? Okay, I'll make a note of that. Well, it's on there. I don't need to make a note of it, but we'll keep that in mind, because that could make a good tutorial. Amar, what is a good background for food photography? I want to cut it and use it on other backgrounds in Photoshop. I don't know what he means by that. Does he mean cut it out and use it as a... I mean, good backgrounds, as you'll see in our food tutorials, is things like chopping boards, tablecloths, textures, wooden surfaces, anything like slate, stone, anything that creates a lovely textural juxtaposition against the food. And that's what Anna introduced a lot in our food tutorials. I don't know about cutting backgrounds out and pasting them into other food shots. That doesn't seem right to me. I mean, whenever we need a background, I prefer to make the background and use the background. So that's what we go with. Right, what have we got out? What else have we got? It's time for a few more questions. What have we got here? I've lost the last one. Chuto now. Hello, I have a question. I see on one of your videos that you have lots of actions for Photoshops for making better light and more adjustments. Can you show us? Well, I can show you where they are. Look, they're here in our download section. We have actions for all of our courses. Those are our business downloads about pricing your work and calculating your finances and costings and everything. Here's Photoshop work-along files. We've got burn and dodge actions, and then we've got some of the actual image files that you can download. And we've got these visual aid layer actions that Victor Fayesh, professional retoucher, created for us for this course, which helps you with your retouching. And we've got Lightroom presets. As a matter of fact, I think we've got 34 Lightroom presets that you can also get from us. But these are all free with membership to Karl Taylor Education. So you just download them from the website once you're a member. I mean, some people charge like hundreds of dollars for Lightroom presets. For $14 membership, you can get in and get all our presets and our actions and everything anyway. So that, I can't keep barking on about how amazing value membership to Karl Taylor Education is, because of the amount of stuff you get compared to other places. So you get these actions. They create burn and dodge layers, visual aid layers that assist you with doing post-production work, or we've got Lightroom presets as well. Our Photoshop stuff is not so much about actions that are like automated stuff that makes your picture look like Instagrammy color effects and all that sort of nonsense. I don't really go for that. I mean, if you look at my work and the style of my work, it's very much more about clarity, clean images. And whilst I've put some warm-up coloration into this shot that we did here for this marine pollution campaign, most of all the post-production work in there is all hand coloration, hand burning and dodging, and it's all about understanding photography. This is a problem with the automated world, right? Everyone wants to just push a button and go, hey, look, I'm a genius. I made a great photo. Oh, I pushed this button, now I've got a funny color effect. But it's all crap. It's all crap. You can't create great work by pushing a button and copying what everyone else is doing. You've got to learn a little bit about understanding lighting, understanding burning and dodging, understanding about guiding the eye, creating images that have got impact and emotion. You can't expect just to push buttons and things happen. Yes, some Lightroom presets might help get you closer or in the ballpark or good for doing black and white conversions. But this world has gone mad for automation. The skill of craft seems to go out the window with a lot of people these days because they just haven't got the passion. You know, they pretend to have the passion, but they don't want to put the work in. And that's very frustrating because on our education platform, we teach you about putting the work in, show you how to do it, give you the grounding, and then help you walk away with the skills so you know how to do it yourself, not automation. I'm sick of people wanting to automate everything and thinking that, oh yeah, if I can just push a button and make me a superstar. It don't happen. Nothing good comes without hard work, right? There is no kung fu master in the world who became a kung fu master without practicing and working really hard. And it's the same with being good at anything, I'm afraid. There's no shortcuts. Next question before I go off on one. Right, here are we. Simon, no, Al Angel. No, I've missed a question. Martin Hirtiere, or whatever his last name is, I'm afraid I couldn't pronounce it. Sorry about that. Hi, Karl. I'm planning to buy a Broncolor flash system, but I found out that the replacement flash tubes are very expensive. Do you have any experience of how often you have to replace them? Never. I've got goodness knows how many Broncolor flash heads in here that have fired more flashes than most people will fire. I fire more flashes in a year than most people fire in a lifetime, and the amount of work and photography we're doing here. I've never, ever had to replace a flash tube. Only the modelling lamps so far, fortunately. The flash tubes are really, really durable, so I don't think that's going to be an issue for you. Mercia Netia, I believe I got that one right. Hi, Karl, what's your favourite portrait lens? Actually, it's this one. It's a 100mm f2.2. Oh, I've got an extension tube on here at the moment as well, so I'll just take that off. So it's a 100mm 2.2 lens. That's my favourite portrait lens, my favourite beauty lens. I actually use it for a lot of product photography. That would be equivalent to about 75 or 80mm on a full frame 35mm camera. I have a nice 85mm Canon lens, which is nice for portraits as well, which I enjoy using when I'm shooting 35mm. Al Angel says, what is the best way to control multiple light ratios for model beauty shots? I'm sorry, Al, right? I'm going to kick off because you're talking nonsense here, right? What is the best way to control multiple lights, okay? The best way is to look at the photograph and decide how much light you need to put in the shadows and how much light you want to put on the model. Or it's to decide, okay, so this shot here has 1, 2, 3, 5 lights used in this shot, okay? Now all I do when I'm lighting a shot is I light one light at a time, test my key light first and look at the exposure. Then I'll turn that one off. Then I'll test maybe the backlight on the hair or one and turn that off. And I just look at the result. And the only thing you need to make a decision on is, do I like the look of that or don't I? And that is it. None of this measuring light with a light meter, none of this letting a computer tell you how it should be or what it should look like. You make the decision visually based on the result that you are seeing, because that is all photography should be about. Why on earth should you colour by numbers, read from a map, or set that at that value and that at that value and that nonsense? And this is one of the things that frustrates me when people ask about lighting diagrams, or can you give me the ratio of the lights? Yeah, I could give you the ratio of that light there and that light there and that light there and tell you that one's on 4.2, that one's on 3.8 and this one's on 2.7. But if I moved one of those lights 3 inches closer, then the power would have to be set completely different. So the exact ratio of the light has to do with the modifier on the light, the distance it is from the subject, the reflectance of the subject. Many factors come into it. And why on earth would you take or make any of those decisions without just assessing the image visually to arrive at your pre-visualized concept that you had in your mind? Every photograph I take, I look at the light, tethered shooting, if I can. If I'm out on location, sometimes you have to refer to the screen on the camera and zoom in, but it's still feasible to do it that way. I look at the light, look at the result and say, is that what I want? If it's too bright, turn the light down. If it's too dark, turn the light up. then do the next light, the next light. Then do them all together and see if the light's changed a little bit, because sometimes one light might bounce off another surface of a softbox, etc. You might have to tweak it a bit further. But that's the only way I assess light. There you go. Hope that was a good enough answer for you, Al. Simon Garcia, can you do a live workshop of how to shoot a car in your studio? Or a motorcycle instead, if it's not possible? Well, as a matter of fact, I've been wanting to get a motorcycle in here for a long time. I love motorbikes. I used to be into motorbikes. I had a Honda Fireblade, I had a 600RR, I had a GSX 750 back in the day, different times, not all at the same time. I didn't have 3 motorbikes at once, but I had these different motorbikes, different times. I used to love taking the bike to France, etc. And I love bikes, and I'd like to get one in the studio. Now, we could shoot a motorbike in here, no problem at all. That's a manageable size. But to shoot a car in here, we have to rig up a big floating ceiling panel to use to illuminate the tops of cars, because normally with car photography, so you kind of use like this is a big floater, a white panel, and then you light up into the panel and you angle the panel to bounce the light back down on the car, and then you use these big mobile walls with white surfaces to create your gradients and everything. I've done it, and it's a wonderful process, and I really enjoy doing it. So at some point I'd like to get the big floating panel, but it's a big effort getting a 6 metre by 4 metre panel up here in the studio, and it's easier if it's motorised and everything else. I just haven't got round to it yet. At some point I'd like to, but yes, a motorbike could be on the cards. I think that might be a good new tutorial. Marius Tudos says, do you think robots and AI will change the way we do photography? Well, I think robots and AI are changing the way we do everything, but photography, you know, it goes back to emotional value, doesn't it? The perception of an image and how you look at an image and what it says to you comes from an emotional response, okay? So therefore, can AI or a robot, can that dictate the emotional content of an image? I don't think so at this stage. I'm not saying it's impossible, because, you know, stranger things have happened, but I think you need a personal touch with it. You know, you could say that, for example, cooking is a set of rules. It's a set of ingredients, a set of measured weights of certain things, certain times, certain cooking temperatures. That's like chemistry in many ways. So it's a formula. Now, when it's formulaic, then yes, maybe a robot could take care of it. But photography isn't quite formulaic like that. It's formulaic, even a word, actually. I'm asking our copywriter if the word I'm using is even a word. But anyway, if you're doing photography, it's not quite the same, is it? Because it's more about interpretation. It's more about emotion. It's more about perception and things that are kind of human qualities in the same way as art. But in saying that, some artificial intelligence has developed and done art and paintings that people couldn't spot the difference. But the thing is, they had to put lots of examples of other famous paintings into the AI system, and it really just kind of copied a blend of them to create a painting. It's still artificial. It's not, you know, so at the moment, I'd say my answer to that is no. Next one, Karl, Chris. Are larger YouTube photography personalities creating a toxic environment by focusing on sponsorships and paid endorsements as opposed to actually talking about the craft? What, like I just did, talking about Squarespace and Squarespace websites and how I use one. I don't know. I mean, we only talk about the brands that we use, okay? I don't like going down this route of, you know, we get people who want to throw stuff at us, send us stuff. Can you talk about this hard drive? We send you this latest gadget? And I always say, no, I can't, I'm afraid, because I don't use it. I don't know what it is. I've never used it. And I'm not going to endorse something or talk about something unless I actually think it's good or I use it. So we talk about Squarespace, and they sponsor us because I use a Squarespace website, and I believe Squarespace websites are really cool, okay? They allow me to create a simple, easy to use website and chuck my images up immediately. So we talk about that. We talk about Broncolor because I'm an ambassador for Broncolor, but we use Broncolor. I cannot endorse Broncolor enough because it is incredible kit that I absolutely love to use. I talk about Hasselblad because I use one, but I've used one for 15 years, okay? So the only type of endorsement that we give is stuff that we actually like using and use for real. There are a lot of, I guess you call them YouTube personalities out there that are maybe talking about too much. I don't pay too much heed to them because it always comes back to the photography. There's a lot of YouTube personalities, photography YouTube personalities, that don't seem to be that good at photography. And I still like to stay focused on the craft. And obviously I do commercial photography as a living and an education business as a living. And I like to make sure that we do both very, very well and still focus on the craft. Janith Tarinda says, hi Karl, I'm struggling with lighting big glossy surfaces. Example, a big black grand piano. I can manage a small product like a watch thanks to your tutorials. Any things that you think I should do? Well, the thing is, Janith, as you've seen in our tutorials, the way we light small glossy products, we go back to the whole car thing. A car is a big glossy product, so you kind of have to light it in the same way with gradients, scrims, or large gradient reflector panels. You just need huge ones, I'm afraid, and that's the physics of it. When you've got an object that is so big, then its visual angle of incidence of the light that can get to it can only get to it from there to there. So you can put a scrim in or whatever this size to light it. But if the object is X big, huge, then that size scrim isn't going to light the bit over there or over there. So you've got to scale it up. So I'm afraid it's just the physics of it. You've got to go larger with larger stuff. Sir Silver Fox says, how can Hasselblad justify the price of one of their cameras at 45,000? This is getting crazy. I don't know of a camera that they do for 45,000 unless it's the multi-shot. This 100 megapixel is not 45,000. This, I think it's about maybe 28,000 pounds, maybe around about that mark. The 50 megapixel is down at 15,000 pounds. Now, you say that, how can they justify it? But actually, they're less expensive than Phase now. So because they're selling a lot more cameras with the X1D and buying more sensors from Sony, I believe Hasselblad's have been able to make their prices more competitive than Phase 1's system. And in my opinion, a better, Hasselblad a better quality camera and lenses. So how can they justify it? How can Phase justify it? These are not, they don't sell these type of cameras in huge, huge volumes. So those chips that are in the back of those cameras cost a lot of money to buy from Sony. Sony make those 100 megapixel and those 50 megapixel chips. They cost a lot of money to buy, and then the lens and everything else. So when you deal with smaller volume stuff, when you look at Canon, Nikon, they're saying millions of cameras, okay? Medium format sells in the thousands of cameras, not millions. So that lower production quantity means an increase in price because it's not scalable to mass production to be able to reduce the price, I'm afraid. But you also have to think the type of photographers that are using medium format a lot, that may be using a medium format camera between 15 and maybe 30,000 pounds, it depends on the projects they're working on, I've got photography colleagues of mine, friends of mine, I can't name any names, but I've got some that have shot commercial shoots for clients where the budget for the shoot is 50 grand, I've got other photographers I know that sell their prints for tens of thousands of pounds. So it depends on where you're at in the market. Like I said, when I first went for a Hasselblad system back in 2005, I was spending 20 grand a year on film and processing and Polaroid test shots. So it was a no-brainer to go to digital. So it does depend on your market. In saying that, there are many photographers that do great product photography on a Sony A7R 46 megapixel camera, or a Nikon D850, or the Canon 5DS, or 5, whichever the one is that's the 48, 50 megapixel camera. You just got to buy really good glass to go with it. Now, if you take the cost of a top-end 35mm camera, that may cost you 4 or 5 grand anyway, and then lenses on top. So it's still not, you've got to just think about what you can afford and what the type of work you're going to do and work your way up. I started in photojournalism, and I started with a Canon T90 and a Canon F1 and a bunch of lenses that cost me several £1,000s to save up for and buy. Remember, I was working 3 jobs at the same back at one time to save for this kit. And I started in photojournalism, and then I moved into studio photography, and I bought a Mamiya RZ67. Then I eventually got a second one. Then I moved up to 5.4 Signer. It was a gradual process. I didn't like, boom, land in this studio and add all this kit and add a Hasselblad camera and everything just like that. I started with nothing at all and gradually increased my clients and my business over the last 25 years. Again, there's no magic, push the magic button and all of this appears like this. You've got to work hard. You've got to start off small and work your way up like you do in anything in life, I think. Or if you're very, very confident in your skills and your abilities and your ability to market yourself, then you take a bank loan for your lighting, your equipment, and your cameras, and then you pay that bank loan off over a long-term period while you're bringing in work, just like any other business does. You know, it's the same for any other business. But the difficulty is that photography has become a very, very competitive market. So unless you're extremely confident that you're going to succeed, it's risky to take a bank loan because photography equipment can be expensive. So you either got to do a mixture of starting small, working your way up, or borrowing a bit of money and starting small, and you know, that's kind of what I did. I mean, when I got my first set of studio lighting, when I first decided to go down the studio photography route after photojournalism, I had to take a big bank loan and buy a load of equipment. But I was confident in my shooting ability and in what the market and what I could get out of the market and marketing myself. I was confident that I was going to earn that money back again. Business risk, supply and demand. That's what it's all about. Right, I'm going to knock this on the head in a minute. I'm going to have 5 more minutes, okay. Filippo Molina says, hi Karl, which photo paper do you like for your prints? I don't often print my work, so I'm afraid I'm out of touch with it. I let the lab sort that out. There's some amazing choices of paper, rag paper, metallic paper, then there's other weird processes like dye bond, acrylic or metallic surfaces, all sorts of stuff. Go and check out people like Loxley Colour, Genesis Digital is another one. Loads of different choices of materials for printing your work. But generally I'm supplying my images directly to clients for adverts, so I don't print them. Next question, Victor Castro. Karl, considering copyright and intellectual property concerns, what is your opinion on including photos of branded products to build a product portfolio if those were not commissioned or endorsed by said brands? I think you're okay with it, Victor, as long as you don't throw the brand in a bad light. If you make their product look crap, then yeah, they're not going to be happy about it and they're going to want it taken down. But a lot of photographers and photographers like myself and other top product photographers that I know, not only do we shoot for decent brands, but we also shoot test shots of other brands we've never shot for, and we put those on our website. And it's not an issue as long as the product looks good and you do a good job, because it's just free advertising for them. I'd say the problem would be is if for whatever reason you didn't make their product look good, then you might have an issue. Adam Borman, Karl, when you feather a light, does it appear harder or softer on the subject? I am thinking harder because the source is getting smaller relative to the subject. My photography instructors say it will get softer. Can you settle the debate? Well, you're not feathering it in the middle, are you? So if you put a light on something, a light has a spread. So a softbox is homogeneous, means it puts out an even patch of light, but it disperses widely. A parabolic light will focus a light, so you'll have a harder, more ball of light in the center, and then a feathering off of light where it falls away at the edges. When you feather, you only feather the edges. You don't go and put the flag in the middle of the light. It's always just coming up on the edge of the light to create a softer shadow at the edges. So no, I understand why you might be confused, the fact that you're making the light smaller, but you're not really making the light smaller. You're just blocking a little bit of the light at the edges to break it apart at the edges and feather it. So no, it doesn't really make it harder in that instance. It doesn't make it softer either. All it does is break up the edge part of the light. So where the fall of the light finishes, it diffuses it a little bit. It breaks it apart a little bit. That's what feathering, and that's what we use flags for, to create softer edges to the light if you're using quite directional light. If you're using a softbox, you know, you're not necessarily going to get that harder light. You might put a flag in to cut the light and reduce it. In that instance, if you're putting a flag close to the softbox and partially over the softbox, yes, you will be making it smaller and you will be creating a harder light. But then you might open the flag a little bit, the angle of it, which lets some of the light out, and then you've got a sort of shadow created, which creates a softer sort of shadow down the edge. But if you took it away, there'd be no shadow at all. So, you know, it depends on how it's used. I'm afraid it's not a simple question to answer, because it depends on the modifier that's being used, and it depends on the way you're flagging it as well. Corinne Wilkinson, hi Karl, do you have any advice for what images, products to add in a portfolio of studio-based images for a student moving into the working world of commercial photography? Well, the working world of commercial photography is quite broad, isn't it? I mean, if I think back to my working world of commercial photography, I used to shoot hospitality images, restaurant images, tourism, hotels, architecture, food photography, product photography, alcohol, electronics, all sorts. It was a broad commercial photography sector. Now, if that's the sector you're aiming for to market yourself in, then yeah, you've got to market yourself for those pictures. It's a supply and demand. So it comes down to, if you're trying to work for yourself there, Corinne, it comes down to which market are you trying to appeal to, and then targeting that market with the correct images. If you want to be a specialist in cosmetics, then obviously that's what you've got to go for. So you have a product and still life photographers mostly specialize in cosmetics, alcohol, fragrances, liquids, that sort of stuff. So that's what's on their portfolio. You have some that may diversify a little bit and do some beauty work as well. So they've got another section with beauty images on as well. So you just have to think about the markets that you're trying to target and you know, putting the appropriate stuff on there. If you're trying to target advertising products still life market, then it wouldn't really be worth having pet portraits on there, would it? So, you know, that's you know, simple sort of business sense really. Right, 2 more questions. Story support. How did you assess light in the film days? We used a light meter. That was when a light meter actually had a purpose. You would have to take a measurement of the light, and then you would look at the light, and then you would have to guess. But actually, still went back to visually, because what we used to do in the old days is in the 5x4 cameras or the Mamiya RZ67s, we had Polaroid backs. And you put a Polaroid back in before you put the film in, and you'd shoot a Polaroid test shot. You'd have to put the Polaroid under your arm, wait a few minutes for it to develop, peel it up, and you could see the picture. Not brilliantly clearly, not as clearly as you can on a back of a camera today, but it gave you enough of an idea about whether your key light was the right exposure, your fill light, and all the rest of it. So you took measurements to get you in the ballpark based on stuff you had in here, did a test shot on Polaroid, and then once you looked at the Polaroid, you tweak your light in a bit, do another Polaroid, and then when you were ready, you put the film back in and you shot the film and off you went. So it was a lot more difficult in the old days, and that's when a light meter had value. Now, why I've got the best instant Polaroid I could ever ask for, because I'm shooting tethered into my computer with a 4K monitor or whatever. I can see every detail. I have all the RGB values there, so I can measure the light with the ink dropper, and I can see the histogram as well. So there is no better light meter than the actual capturing software. I use Focus software, which is the Hasselblad one. Then there's Capture One. You can also shoot into Lightroom. All of those programs allow you to see the light better than you were ever able to see it in any way before. Karl says, what genre of photography do you prefer for personal work? I still prefer product photography, to be honest. I mean, like, take a look at this here, see? I love doing that stuff. That's what I really enjoy doing. It's what I've done most of my working career. So, you know, coming up with stuff like this and making that look cool, because, you know, for me, it's about making something boring look amazing is quite challenging, and lighting it in a certain way to make it look desirable. But in saying that, I like, you know, I mean, here's another one we did the other day as well. So it's making boring stuff look cool. I like doing that. I don't know why, I just like it. It's a nice challenge. But I also do enjoy shooting some beauty. I'm not a fashion photographer, but we do a little bit of that in our tutorials, but I shoot beauty work and sort of stylized portrait work and that sort of stuff as well, which I enjoy doing that as well, but not as much as I enjoy doing product photography. And if you say personal work, well, that is the only personal work I really do. When I go on holiday with my family and my 2 screaming kids, I only have an iPhone to take pictures. Right, next one. 2 more questions left. One from Diamond Photography. Karl, I've planned to buy some Hasselblad cameras and glasses and full lighting from Broncolor. Do they give some discount on massive buying? They might do in America because the distributor is Broncolor Hasselblad USA, so I think it's the same distributor. But I can't answer that. I don't even know which country you're in. We offer some discounts if you're in Europe for certain stuff. I think we can get some discounts on Bron gear for you, depending on what you're buying. And you'd have to email us, but that's only applicable if you're a member on Karl Taylor Education. So you'd have to check with your dealers on that and see what they say. Lavina Meek says, do you think there is more work in commercially related photography than actual studio such as portrait? Right, okay. That is a difficult question. There is a lot of work in commercial photography because all of the commercial world hasn't gone away. There are still hotels, there are still restaurants, food, there are still hospitality, tourism, products, small brewing companies, large alcohol companies, small cosmetic and health companies. There's tons and tons of stuff. Anyone that manufactures something or anyone that provides a service like a spa or a hotel or a restaurant or anything like that, or even accountants who need business portraits, it all needs photography. The difficulty is what has arisen in recent years is that there are lots more people that wanted to be photographers. They tried their hand at it, the market got swamped, and it became more difficult to survive for certainly for a period of time because there was too many people trying to take a piece of the pie, and that meant everyone got a small piece. Apart from those that were really established with a set of clients, it became very difficult. And the problem with that was there was a jump from people buying a digital camera and calling themselves a photographer without really doing the training or the groundwork or learning properly, like with our education system. And then they were out there, trying to do photography. And then it ended up like a bidding frenzy. You had companies that weren't even sure what a good photograph was, and then they were going for the lowest bidder, and then people were doing photography for stupid money or no money at all sometimes, just for exposure. And the whole market got a little bit messed up, I think. Didn't really affect me. As a matter of fact, I went the other way because I kind of specialise more with some particular companies that use me for a certain set of skills. So I put my prices up because I wanted to separate myself out of that market. So the commercial world's not gone away, and the commercial requirement for images of everything is still there. It's just how many people are out there doing it. But then I think if you do it really well, like anything, if you do it really well and you offer a good service and you're competitive but not stupidly cheap and not stupidly expensive, but most importantly, you deliver good results for your clients, you work hard, then yeah, it's still possible to make a living. Is portraiture in a studio or wedding photography more lucrative? I don't know. Would a portrait studio be more profitable for you? I don't know. They've been hard hit as well because, so many people don't bother going to a portrait studio to get their kids shot anymore because they'll just use their phone to take their pictures. So the whole thing has changed from the traditional way, if you like, of doing things. Right, stop any more questions, please, Emma, because the last question's here. Someone says, could you make a video on using equipment which isn't necessarily photography related, but makes great photos? Hold on, I don't get that. Make a video on equipment which isn't necessarily photography related, but makes great photos. What equipment could make great photos but isn't photography related? I don't understand the question, I'm afraid, because surely if you're using some sort of equipment and it records an image, then it's either got to be a camera. Yeah, maybe they mean, yeah, but I mean, it's still a camera, isn't it? So, then if you're trying to make great photos with a camera, or a compact camera or a simple camera, then you're left with composition and understanding natural light and when to shoot and using those skill sets. That's already covered in our, the fundamentals of making a great image apply across whether it's shooting on that or whether it's shooting on this. The fundamentals are the same. Oh, right, what, bits and accessories? Yeah, but that comes up in our courses all the time. So that's already in our education platform, and I think we've already got a few bits out on YouTube. And we've got one video on YouTube. I photograph a bottle of wine with 3 desk lamps, and I make a homemade snoot for one of the desk lamps to illuminate the label, because I was sick of everyone barking on about, oh, you can only make great pictures because you've got all this great gear. So I said, no, I can't. Here, I'll watch this. It's on YouTube, so check that out if you like. Andrew Henning, at some point it would be good to hear your views on getting business from advertising agencies versus direct from users. I'm struggling with agencies. Agencies can be tricky, Andrew. I remember back in the day, I used to farm out brochures galore and cards and mail shots, trying to get my foot in the door with agencies, and eventually got in there. It's just a case of right place, right time sometimes. They might be working on a liquid or a whiskey shoot or an electronic shoot, and your card arrives on their desk that's got an electronic shot or whatever on, or you just got to be persistent. You've got to make phone calls, you've got to knock on doors, keep badgering them, ask them if you can come and see the art director to show them your portfolio. But you obviously have to have good work, okay? Now, I don't know what your level of your work is, but you have to be realistic as well. There are lots of good photographers out there. So if you're sending work in that is only mediocre or average, then of course it's not going to get noticed or get in there. If you're sending in good work and it's very good and you can offer a good service, then eventually you'll get a break and someone will speak to you and want to learn a little bit more about what you do. So it is persistence. But I work with ad agencies, art directors, and I also work directly with big companies that have got their own in-house team. So there are companies that deal with their own marketing themselves. They don't go through ad agencies. So that's a possibility as well. Right, I think we've done over an hour there, haven't we, Ben? Over an hour of Q&A. Wow. Look at Ben, he's sat there just monitoring the feed. And so I want to say thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. I want to say thank you to you guys for tuning in, and hopefully this Q&A session was useful to you, and I was able to answer some of your questions. Remember tonight, Karl Taylor Education, live, liquid, alcohol, clear bottle shoot, and I'm going to show you how we make condensation, everything, all the techniques for that. And loads of great live shows coming up on Karl Taylor Education, loads of new courses coming on karltayloreducation.com as well. If you're not a member, stop sitting on the fence, get over there and check it out. Thanks for watching. See you next time.